Hi, thanks for watching BibleMountain.com. In this video we're going to read from Exodus 38 and talk about a picture that reminds us that the Creator, God, is exalted and we are not. The context of chapter 38 is the Israelites are building the tabernacle. These verses tell us about the courtyard that was built that surrounded the tabernacle. So let's start reading at verse 9. Then he made the court. So notice it says they're making a court. This would have been the courtyard that surrounded the tabernacle itself. Then he made the court. For the south side, the hangings of the court were of fine twisted linen, 100 cubits. Their 20 pillars and their 20 sockets made of bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. For the north side, there were 100 cubits. Their 20 pillars and their 20 sockets were of bronze. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. For the west side, there were hangings of 50 cubits with their 10 pillars and their 10 sockets. The hooks of the pillars and their bands were of silver. For the east side, 50 cubits. And we'll continue reading in a minute. So we see there's a courtyard surrounding the tabernacle, and it's 100 cubits by 50 cubits. A cubit is about 18 inches, so this courtyard was about 150 feet by 75 feet. Not quite as big as at a football field. Now let's think about the purpose of the courtyard. And to do that, let's think about modern society. If you're driving through a town and you come across a house that has a huge yard and a fence around it or a gate, what does that do? Well, that fence and that gate sets apart that house from everything around it. It puts some separation between the house and everything around it. Likewise, if you're in a government area and you go past maybe the president's house or the king or queen's palace or perhaps the prime minister's residence, oftentimes there's a fence surrounding it and there's a gate. And the purpose of the fence and the gate is to put some separation between the government officials and everyone else. And that separation does a couple things. One, it gives some protection, which obviously is important. But it also establishes the fact that these people are important. It sets them apart. It elevates them a little bit. And that's what was happening here with the tabernacle. They built the tabernacle, but they didn't want the tents of the common Israelites to be pitched right beside the tabernacle itself. Because God is exalted. God is much higher than we are, and He deserves some separation from the rest of the Israelites. And so they put this courtyard around the tabernacle to keep some separation between the common Israelites and the tabernacle itself, which is where God lived. And so that made some separation between God and the Israelites. And that was important because God is indeed very important. And this picture we have here of the courtyard reminds us that God is important. God is exalted. God is higher than we are. God is exalted and we are not. Now let's continue reading. Verse 14. The hangings for the one side of the gate were 15 cubits with their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. And so for the other side, on both sides of the gate of the court, were hangings of 15 cubits with their 3 pillars and their 3 sockets. All the hangings of the court all around were of fine twisted linen. The sockets for the pillars were of bronze, the hooks of the pillars and their bands of silver, and the overlaying of their tops of silver, and all the pillars of the court were furnished with silver bands. And so here we see that there was a gate in and out of the courtyard on the east side, and there was a hanging of 15 cubits on one side, hanging of 15 cubits on the other side, and so that tells us the gate itself was 20 cubits wide. Now let's keep reading in verse 18. The screen of the gate, and so now we see that there was an opening on the east side, but it wasn't open to view. They put a screen there to hide the opening so that it wasn't necessarily so easy to look into the courtyard. And again, the screen that covered up the opening made some separation between God and the tabernacle and all the Israelites. Verse 18. The screen of the gate of the court was the work of the weaver of blue and purple and scarlet material on fine twisted linen, and the length was 20 cubits, and the height was 5 cubits, corresponding to the hangings of the court. Their 4 pillars and their 4 sockets were of bronze, their hooks were of silver, and the overlaying of their tops and their bands were of silver. All the pegs of the tabernacle and of the court all around were of bronze. Here we are told the height of all these hangings, and it was 5 cubits, which meant it was about 7.5 feet tall, which was tall enough that the Israelites could not look over these hangings into the courtyard. And again, the visual impediment made some separation between God and the Israelites. And that separation was important because that separation, the courtyard, reminded the Israelites that God was exalted and they were not. God was God and they were not. They were lesser than God. Now here's an overhead view of what it would have looked like. On the top and bottom are the north and south sides. Off to the left is the west side hangings. And then on the right side is the east side. And you see that there was the opening in the hangings that surrounded the courtyard. But then there was a screen that kept people from being able to look into the courtyard very easily. Now these verses in Exodus are a picture for us of the fact that God is exalted and we are not. And we see some similar teachings in the New Testament. So let's take a look at Philippians 2, starting at verse 8. Being found in appearance as a man, Jesus humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. For this reason also God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name which is above every name. So we see here the word exalted. Jesus is exalted. And I mention all this because it's very common in 21st century American Christianity to think that somehow we're somewhat equal to Jesus and we're equal to God. A lot of people have this idea when we go to heaven, we're going to walk up to Jesus and crawl in his lap and snuggle with him. And I don't think that is the case. I think the Bible teaches very clearly that there is some separation between God and us. God is holy, we are not. God is exalted, Jesus is exalted, and we are not. And even when we get to heaven, we are going to have that sense of the fact that there is some separation between who God is and who we are. And we see a picture of that separation in Exodus, in the fact that they had the courtyard around the tabernacle. And we are told here in this verse that God exalted Jesus, and he gave him a name which is above every name. We see something similar in Hebrews chapter 7, starting at verse 23. The former priests, on the one hand, existed in greater numbers because they were prevented by death from continuing. But Jesus, on the other hand, because he continues forever, holds his priesthood permanently. Therefore he is able also to save forever those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was fitting for us to have such a high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. So here we see that Jesus is exalted above the heavens. And this is an important teaching for us as we go through life, that we never lose sight of the fact of who Jesus is. Yes, Jesus loves us. Yes, Jesus died for us. Yes, Jesus cares for us. Yes, we can pray and ask God to do things for us. But as we do all those things, we have to remember Jesus is exalted. The creator of the universe is exalted, and we are not. We are nothing compared to Jesus, the Creator. And we need to keep that in mind because Jesus, the Creator, deserves the reverence and the awe and the recognition that we give to him when we understand that we are nothing compared to him. And so as we go through the Christian life, let's keep in perspective who Jesus is and who we are not, and give him that awe and reverence that he deserves. If you haven't joined my email list yet, please do so. First of all, it is free. By signing up, you get immediate access to all my free content. It'll be delivered right to your email inbox. This is the best way to make sure you don't miss out on any of my free content. In order to sign up, go to BibleMountain.com, click on follow. There will be a place there to enter your email address. Once again, thank you for watching BibleMountain.com.